Well, for more, let's go to journalist Miriam Spritzer in Porto Alegre, Brazil. And Miriam, maybe let's start by explaining the significance of this change in regulations or laws regarding land demarcation for the indigenous peoples, especially for people outside Brazil. What is the significance of that?
Well, basically, this ministries, before you had in Brazil a lot of ministries that existed for different things. And the big change that happened with this new government is that once he took over, now he's trying to make a group of different ministries instead of having like 40, having more like 10. So the idea behind that is that not necessarily this agencies and these programs are going to cease to exist, but they are now going to belong to a different ministry within the whole governmental system. So the change with the indigenous programs was ruled and is still ruled by FUNAI, which is the name of this agency that took care of the indigenous interests. And what happened is that although it existed, it wasn't really, it didn't really take care of them, and the quality of life that these indigenous peoples had in the past wasn't great. And of course, there is controversy when you talk about these big changes and what to expect from it. So, we're curious to see what's going to come up forward, but the idea behind is that it's not going to exist, but it's going to be under an umbrella of different things.
So, Miriam, before we get to some of the reactions to that, let's go through the other change that Bolsonaro has made into LGBT rights, as we mentioned, sort of taking it off the agenda of a new human rights ministry. Is he even does he have the actual power to take away those rights?
No, he has no power to take away those rights. And even if he wanted, and let's say even if he had the power, there is still a Congress and a Senate that would stop that.
So why do this?
Although, well, I think that he is a very controversial character, so it's hard to really say what's the agenda behind that. But I think one of the things that he promised was that his government was going to be more under the Christian values and philosophy. So I think he's trying to focus more on the family values instead of and to the broader population instead of just minorities. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that these minorities are not going to be taken care of. He's just trying to figure out a way, and that's based on his speeches, right? It's just trying to figure out a way that everyone is equal and has the same opportunities.
So what kind of reaction are these changes generating in Brazil?
Well, you have two types of reactions, right? You have a big population that voted for him, and it's happy with the changes because the fact is that the majority of Brazil was not really doing well. We have an average of, 70,000 homicides a year. Crime is out of control. There is sexualization of kids too early on. So a part of the population is very happy with these possible changes. And yes, of course, you have the critics and people that are like, what's going to happen with the minorities? What's going to happen? The LGBT community is very scared with these possible changes. And the reaction was that, for example, there was big communities, marriages, everybody was getting married at the same time on December 31st, afraid that they will lose this right. And the same with people that support the indigenous communities. There's also the concern, are they really going to be taken care of? Are they going to be able to develop and, have a proper care that they deserve?
Miriam, so it sounds like, at least for indigenous communities and for LGBT communities, that they were right to be concerned, judging by the first couple of days of Bolsonaro's presidency. Do they have any potential recourse? Does the LGBT community, for example, have a way around these decisions?
I believe so. I think the big point of having an opposition is that you make your voice heard, and hopefully these things will set up in a way that these voices will be heard. There are ways to protest and contest that, but for now, it's hard to tell really what's going to happen. Now, the biggest concern is that the Minister of Human Rights, Women's Rights, and the minorities, basically where all of this is being globed, she's an evangelical, a very strong evangelical, and she makes very big statements that not necessarily resonate to these minorities. So there is a side of concern, and I think if they're loud enough and if they make their voices heard, there will be changes, because we have been seeing the government being open to hearing these complaints and trying to adjust.